Okay. I think we should get started, Diane. We've got a lot to fit in this afternoon. Grand. Right, let's get going. Okay. I am delighted to welcome you all to the opening session of the NSEAD Summer Conference. What a fun-filled summer we've got ahead of us. Our theme is leadership, and over the summer months, we're going to be inviting you to join in with a really lively, flexible programme focused on leadership, which feels very, very appropriate today, shall we say, as I sort of dipped into PMQs earlier to see leadership in action and questions about it. But it's different here. We're going to be looking at how we can lead change through and in art, craft and design education. And what better place to start a leadership conversation with this session, leading change in uncertain times. We're going to hear from three really incredible activists this afternoon, all coming from very different perspectives, but who all believe in the power of art to empower those people who want to make change. We are welcoming Lily Pfaffenzeller, A-level student and Articulation Prize finalist. We welcome the director of the Foundling Museum, Caro Howell, and artist, activist, and advocacy icon, Bob and Roberta Smith. It's wonderful to have you here. We have to imagine the thunderous applause at this point, but yeah, welcome to you all. So, at the heart of this session this afternoon is this notion of voice. It's something we talk about at NSEAD an awful lot. And we're inspired actually, when we're thinking about how we begin conference, by Bob's rallying cry, artists, if you have a voice, use it. But the fact is that not all children in the UK are getting an art education that nurtures that voice. Some of you, I can see some of you were with us last night for the Art, Craft Design All-Party Parliamentary Group meeting, where we presented headlines from the forthcoming Art Now reports, which is a comprehensive survey of what's happening in art and design education in our schools right now. And, you know, it paints a worrying picture of the decrease in the amount of art, craft and design being taught in schools, and a demoralised set of teachers as well, in truth. So we really do need to fight for that voice, for all children to be able to develop as artists and makers. It is not, however, all gloom. There really is hope. Certainly last night we heard from Bridget Phillipson, who's the Shadow Secretary of State for Education, and she gave a really hopeful vision of what might be possible. And more importantly, I think the art education community is where the heart lies, and that's you, of course. So that's what we're here to look at tonight. I'd like to begin by introducing Lily Pfaffenzeller. Now, Lily has inspired me enormously. Art can be dangerous. What artists might want to say is not always convenient and not always tolerated. And we're going to hear this from Lily now. Lily is a student currently studying A-levels. She's in her penultimate year of secondary education at the Cheltenham Ladies College, where she has an art scholarship. Art's always been a really prominent part of her upbringing, and Lily's great aunt was also an artist and inspired her from a very early age. Lily's art coursework, she tells us, focuses on art's interdisciplinary nature, particularly where art and science meet. So I can imagine quite a good conversation between Lily and Bob at some stage. And I just want to say, I heard Lily speak earlier this year at National Gallery, where she was an Articulation Prize finalist. And I was absolutely blown away by her presentation, which was I Weiwei's Straight. And I'm delighted that Lily's bringing that to a conference today. So Lily, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction, Michelle. I'm just going to share my screen, and as you know, I'm going to be talking about Ai Weiwei's Straight. Can everyone hear me all right? Yeah, okay. Sorry, hang on. Some technical difficulties are going on.
No worries, Lily. It came up with that enable editing, which sometimes stops you from opening it up.
Do you know how I can stop sharing?
So if you go down to the bottom, there should be a right in the middle, it says share screen. You should be able to press stop share.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It's always the way, isn't it? It goes perfectly when you practice, and then live it never goes as well.
Yeah, okay, sorry. I think it automatically closed my PowerPoint for some reason. Okay, we good now?
Perfect, that's great.
Sorry, guys. Okay, so yeah. I went to my first ever gallery exhibition when I was 10 years old. I've been to many gallery exhibitions since. And yet, half a decade later, the one that stands out the most to me, the most striking, the most tangible, the one that still drifts into my thoughts from time to time, was my first ever experience. Highway Ways Straight at the Royal Academy in London. I want you to look at this installation. Record your initial thoughts, reactions, and emotions. Imagine you're there, its body spanning from the front of your screen where I am here to beyond the confines of the back of your room down there. At first glance, the most significant thing may be the scale, but besides that, its meaning is shrouded, a mystery. Even the title Straight refuses to yield, beyond the obvious anyway. And so to you, this may simply be an aesthetic industrial arrangement. And at first glance, that's what it was to me too. Now, I want you to consider this. What if I told you that this installation was made of 150 tons of steel reinforcing bars, all mangled and twisted from crumbled buildings, each straightened out by hand? What if I told you that these were the product of an earthquake, residue from the shoddy infrastructure of Sichuan schools in China, schools previously housing 5,000 children while they stood, and taking them away as it fell, all victims to the earthquake? Look at straight again. How has its meaning shifted? For me, straight evolved into this expression of injustice, pain, and suffering. And when I started thinking about this, I realized that a lot of this meaning translated into the name of I's installation itself. You see, what do you think of when I say the word straight? If we interpret straight literally, it has connotations of rigidity, an inability to be forced or bent out of shape. Yet, look at these rods. They're not straight, nor are they rigid. They're all twisted and mangled. They are exactly opposite to everything they are supposed to symbolize. And it is from this juxtaposition that hopelessness arises. But even though these rods were specifically designed for strength and safety, they were ultimately useless in providing this promised protection. There's something else particularly unusual about straight, even at first glance. The rolling effect across its surface gives the installation this undulating shape that kind of reminds me of water, the sort of movement you'd observe in waves in the sea, fluid and in motion. But even this acts in contrast to the name straight, for one wouldn't expect the nature of an installation by this name to be characterized by these rolling curves. And so, as you can imagine, the public's reaction to this piece was an incredibly poignant one. But amongst such emotions evoked were outcries of rage and anger. Why? Because straight isn't just a means of communicating the sobering impact of natural disasters. It more importantly conveys a political truth, one that would have otherwise remained buried from the public. When earthquakes do occur, it's rare they take down entire schools and their populations with them. The reason why the Sichuan earthquake differs lies behind the shoddily built infrastructure of Sichuan schools in China as a result of Chinese governmental corruption. A combination of insufficient steel bars and substandard concrete resulted in the perfect recipe for disaster. On closer inspection, the buildings were described as flimsy and porous as tofu dregs. Protesting parents were silent, and compensation, if any, was poor. Activists were persecuted, and Ai Weiwei was no exception. In exposing the height of China's corruption for the entire world to see, Ai saw his Beijing studio trashed, was arrested for so-called economic crimes, and beaten by Chinese officials, resulting in his hospitalization. Ai, however, is no stranger to such persecution. You see, Ai isn't just an artist, but also an activist, often integrating the two within his work. This becomes apparent when looking at his previous works, such as dropping a Han Dynasty urn. These three photographs, when accompanied with context, summon controversy just like straight. The public were outraged on learning that the object being destroyed was $1 million 2,000-year-old vase, to which I simply replied, the only way of building a new world is by destroying the old one, in quoting the notorious communist leader Mao Zedong. In other words, I was criticizing the evils of the Chinese communist regime. This motif of responding to Chinese-based issues also connects to Ai's Chinese ethnicity, adding this personal layer to his work that's inextricable from his identity. This contributes to what makes straight so powerful. It's as close to the truth as you can get, because unlike words on paper, as many would have read on the news, it would have been a completely different experience for the public seeing it in person. And so straight acts as this beacon for what art can and should be. Art can be aesthetic, but it can also be a powerful communicator of emotion, truth, injustice, and activism, and can be extended into political realms. Moreover, straight is important because it unites us on this universal scale through connecting to our humanity. And so, if I never went to the Royal Academy 7 years ago, if I never went to that first exhibition, I don't think I'd be the artist I am today. It is thanks to straight I can say I truly understand what art means, and hopefully you too realize just how versatile and powerful art can be. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily. I felt a moment of silence, very appropriate in what would otherwise certainly have been thunderous applause. Thank you so much. And the panelists are all they're giving you their praise. Thank you for opening conference with a reminder of just how high the stakes can be, and how art can really shift our understanding and moves to change. And also thank you for reminding me how it feels to go to an exhibition and have that moment of epiphany when you understand that power. I remember seeing that exhibition very clearly. I was a bit older than you, I wasn't 10, but yeah, and I can honestly say that you've taken my understanding and reflection to a whole different level. So Thank you so much for that. I know people may well have questions for Lily. We're going to hopefully have time for questions for everybody at the end. So if you do have questions as we go through, audience, please pop them in the Q&A box as opposed to the chat. I'll try and keep an eye on both, but I might miss them in the chat. So into the Q&A box if you have any questions. And Lily, if you can stick around to the end, that'd be wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, moving on. I'd like to introduce, it's a great pleasure with which I do introduce Caro Howell. And I'm very grateful to Caro because she's coming to us today not feeling 100% health-wise. So big thanks, Caro, for giving the time, particularly when you're not well. But Caro is the director of the Foundling Museum. She has worked over a varied career on as many things, but an independent museum education consultant in the UK and abroad, developing projects that really explore issues of advocacy, which is of course something that is very close to NSEAD's heart. And we are big fans of Caro's work, I have to tell you. Caro's developed award-winning resources and innovative programs with many, many prestigious organisations. She's also an absolute champion for young people's leadership in the cultural sector. So, Caro, I'm delighted to welcome you to conference. We're eager to hear more about the work of the Foundling Museum, and in particular, its aims to be a force for change for young people and their futures. So, Caro, welcome.
Thank you very much. Right, let me now share my screen, and there we go. And that should be, so everyone can see that all right. Right. For those of you who don't know the Foundling Museum, we are based in Bloomsbury. We're about halfway between the British Museum and King's Cross Station, opposite the Renoir Cinema and the Brunswick Centre. And this is us, tucked away on Brunswick Square. We tell a remarkable history that goes back almost 300 years, that is about the Foundling Hospital, which was simultaneously the UK's first children's charity, set up to take in babies that would otherwise have been abandoned on London streets. But due to the input and impact of some of its founding governors, led by the artist William Hogarth, it also became the UK's first public art gallery. And really, our whole story is about creative action. It's about the agency of the artist in society, the way that artists of all disciplines can shine a light on situations, or activate situations, or galvanize society to see or be or act in ways that they might not otherwise have considered. And it's also a story and a collection that inspires change. And I would say that the two most common words used in our visitor comments book is either sort of poignant or heartbreaking, but the other one is inspiring. And I think this combination of challenge and then creative response to it, and a creative response that is galvanizing, is really important. And I think, you know, the times in which we live, where the scale of the challenges that face us all seems so overwhelming, I think it's really important, the story that we tell, which is reminding people that everybody has something within their skill set. It doesn't matter who they are, how old they are, but something that can be used to make a difference. And if enough of us come together to try and tackle something, then really important and lasting change can be made effect, can be brought into effect. And our story is also one of creative philanthropy, and I'm now trying to work out, there we go, go on, there we are. So, as I said, the Foundling Hospital was established in 1739, and one of its most important governors was the artist William Hogarth, who had got involved in Thomas Coram's campaign to establish a Foundling Hospital. This is Hogarth's wonderful portrait of his friend, the founder, Thomas Coram. The campaign took Coram 17.5 years. He devoted, you know, most of his life and most of his energy and money to getting this charity off the ground. And a year after it was established, Hogarth donated to the charity his full-length portrait of his friend, Thomas Coram. And Hogarth was running the only art school in London at the time and was looking at ways to promote contemporary British art at a time when the received wisdom was that great art was French or Italian. And Hogarth saw this win-win. Coram was trying to attract wealthy, educated London society to his charity, which was built outside London in those days, but had no real kind of draw. And Hogarth was trying to find a way to promote contemporary British art to the very same people. So by filling up the empty wall space with the best that contemporary British artists could do, it gave people a reason to come and was a showcase for contemporary art. And it really got the ball rolling. And it wasn't just the visual artists who got involved donating their work. So our collection spans not just painting and sculpture, but music, literature, masons, plasterers, really all of the creative disciplines. And as you can see from the little detail here, that painted very clearly by Hogarth at the bottom of Coram's feet, so right at eye level, painted and given by William Hogarth. So very explicit from the very beginning that this was kind of, this was creative action, and it was a kind of a clarion call to other people that what are you going to do? What are you going to give? If the artists can start, giving and supporting, what can you do? Really the contempt, I always say to people, ours is a story about contemporary artists. And although some of our artists have been dead for 250 years, this ongoing dialogue between creative people around the subject matter of children at the margins, vulnerable and marginalized children, children's opportunities, the way that, in a sense, the way that creative people can galvanize society to see the challenges and the systemic inequalities that children in our society face. And that artists are inspired by our collection and by our story and by their creative ancestors to respond. And the work that we do will often involve commissioning artists. And this was a work by David Shrigley that he made that we commissioned back in 2013. Inspired by the 18th century tokens. These are the little objects that mothers left with the babies that they left at the Foundling Hospital to be used as identifiers should they ever be able to return and claim their baby. And if you look at on the rows of tokens, second row up from the bottom, second in from the left, there is a token that just has engraved on it, this is a token. And David took that as the starting point for the piece that he made for us and then subsequently donated to our collection. So we use our collection as a way to really draw out the social relevance and the creative relevance in our historic story. 3 other works in our collection at the moment, a wonderful piece by Michael Craig Martin that again we commissioned back in 2016. And this was his response, interestingly, to the tokens again. In the centre, we have a work by Gavin Turk that was part of an exhibition that Cornelia Parker curated for us in 2016 called Found, where we had 69 artists respond to the idea of found. And this was Gavin's piece. It's a painted life-size bronze, and it's underneath another one of the great Hogarth paintings in our collection in the courtroom, and was hugely powerful and incredibly poignant. And I think really again drew out those parallels at how in the 18th century society had managed to normalize the fact that they would be passing abandoned babies on doorsteps and rubbish heaps, and that somehow they found a way to live with this in the same way that, you know, we find a way to live with homelessness and normalize it in our head, but actually it needs calling out. It's wrong, it's shocking, these things need to be managed. And I think if we look at how quickly we were able to galvanize to do something about the situation for homeless people when COVID hit, that you go, you know, if the will is there, things can change. And then on the right, one of the newest works to enter our collection is a portrait of one of the former pupils of the Foundling Hospital, because the Foundling Hospital didn't close as an institution for children until 1954. So there are just a few hundred former pupils who are still alive. They're very elderly now. And at the end of last year, we commissioned a series of portraits, which are the first portraits in 280 years to be commissioned of the children effectively. And this was Wolfgang Tillman's portrait of Ruth, who is a wonderful former pupil who does a lot of work with us. So we use our collection, as I said, to through acquisition, but also through exhibitions, to kind of draw out those creative dialogues and relevance. We also, even though our story is very much about the Foundling Hospital and the children, when I arrived 11 years ago, the children, much like the mothers, were a real absent presence in our story, because our collection, predominantly 18th century, contains a lot of portraits of the governors and the benefactors. So even though our museum is about childhood, it wasn't necessarily a particularly child-friendly collection. So thinking about in our acquisitions, how for our younger visitors, they see themselves when they come, they see themselves in the story, not just the subject matter of the story. And so these are 3 works in our collection. Wonderful sculpture by Yinka Shonabare, who, like Cornelia, and in fact Bob, is a fellow of the museum. Trumpet Boy greets visitors when they arrive. Also articulates the musical element of our story, because Handel was a great supporter of the hospitals. In the centre is a work by Quentin Blake. It's part of a series of 24 large-scale drawings he donated to the museum back in 2019, 2020. And then on the right is a wonderful portrait of another of our fellows, Jacqueline Wilson. And again, she, as for her fellowship project, she wrote at the time what was her first historical novel, which was Hetty Feather. And I would say 90% of the families who come to the museum come to see where Hetty lived. So she is our contemporary Hogarth. And I think, again, for younger visitors, as they walk up the stairs to see Jacqueline, who they know, and to have that reinforced, in a sense, their connection to our story is really important. So, but we have, as I said, this dual part of our story. It's about both the artists and the creativity and the creative action, but it is also about the young people. And it's where those 2 things come together that I think our most powerful agency lies. And the way that we work with young people is really driven by 2 things. One, our historic DNA and its focus, and the other, this idea of inch wide, mile deep. We do a few things, focusing on a few areas, and we do it in depth, and we do it over sustained periods of time, so that we can affect a kind of a lasting positive change. And taking our leaf from the Foundling Hospital, the 2 key areas of our work is early years, working with families who are facing very challenging circumstances, and working with children aged 3, 4, 5, 6, over every other week, over a full academic year, and then year on year, working with their parents as well, to really try and support those early years of their development, language acquisition, finding gross motor skills, helping kind of close the attainment gap, really. So our year early, and we have partner nurseries and primaries that we work with. And the other area, which is of huge importance to us, is care leavers. And young adults aged 18 to 26 who have left the care system and face this care cliff, really. And being there, and we run training programs for them. They last about 6 months long. They're weekly, they're paid. And we train the young people to be able to help devise and deliver our family program. But as along the way, what we're actually also teaching is life skills, art skills. It's about building self-esteem, self-confidence, enabling them to see different choices for themselves, often returning to higher education, apprenticeships, employment, and obviously employment with us. So you see one of our trainees is in the Amira in the top left. Rahima is helping run a family workshop, I can see in the top right. We also, one of our great founding governors was Dr. Richard Mead, who lived where Great Ormond Street Hospital is now, which is just around the corner. And we do quite a bit of work as well in acute paediatric wards, psychiatric and transplant wards, so that's in there as well. So that element of our work is really important to us, this sustained working with young people. But an element of this is, how do we enable this work not just to impact on the lives of the young people themselves, but to fold back into the life of the museum and the wider sector. So the training programme has grown and developed, and we now have an annual, what we call a career development fellowship, which enables one young care leaver to basically have a full paid apprenticeship effectively for a year in the museum, to support them learning about work within the heritage sector and the museum sector, and helping them develop their career and use us as a kind of a launch pad for the next step. Later this year, we'll be launching a digital creative portal to be able to reach more care experienced young people right across the country and help them build a community digitally, and also act as a signpost for both cultural offer and opportunity in their particular areas, but also signposting them to opportunities. And then, of course, the vocational opportunities we have within the museum, which also enables our audiences who are working alongside our graduate trainees, delivering our family programs, enabling a kind of a better mutual understanding. In our exhibition programs, we again focus on, this is the show that we currently have at the moment, looking at characters who are orphaned, adopted, fostered or found within comics over 125 years from 9 different countries, 3 different continents. And this is again an approach we take rather like Hogarth, about don't lecture people, you need to kind of show people a good time and try and shift their opinion as you go. So this is an exhibition where we're trying to raise people's awareness of the life experiences of looked after people, the challenges that they face in society, the isolation that they often face, through their representation within graphics and novels and comics. And their section of the exhibition includes artists who themselves have care experience. We also use our exhibitions to be campaigning and to be sort of activists and advocates. The artist Mark Neville, who we're actually showing work that he's been producing in Ukraine since 2015, and is now producing new work. He's based in Kyiv, and but back in 2016, I think, 2016, we did 2017, an exhibition called Child's Play, which was really a call to action for politicians and lawmakers and opinion formers to really challenge them to protect play, both physically within the built environment, within playgrounds, within adventure playgrounds, within parks, but also to protect play within the curriculum itself, and looking at images of children at play right around the world, and looking at play very honestly and what its role is in children's development. So sort of not pretty play as it's constructed, but play that children develop for themselves, and really trying to raise awareness of its importance and how it isn't protected and how it is under threat. This is an installation shot from the exhibition showing work that he was doing in Ukraine, Afghanistan, Canada, America, but you can see the table there which had the publication, which was the call to arms, asking audiences to in a sense take the campaign further, giving them ideas as to how they could do this, and informing them about the UN rights of the child, in which play is important there. A bit more recently, 2019, just before COVID, we did a show called Bedrooms of London in partnership with Childhood Trust. And this again was looking at the impact of the lack of affordable housing and its impact on childhood poverty, and then that trickle-down impact on the NHS and services by showing the images of the rooms in which children were growing up, alongside a verbatim text from usually the parent about the situation. And then as part of that, the Childhood Trust report, we had it turned into this infographic by Scriberia. And then this was not only a big wall graphic, but was a takeaway for all of our visitors, which then gave, again, 3 calls for action on a very simple level. Here you can donate. A bit more complicated, here you can download the report itself. Or thirdly, here was a link where people could go and find some charitable organisations and social organisations in their own boroughs that were trying to tackle the effects of childhood poverty. Or we have artists like Claire Toomey doing exchange. So there's 1,110 cups, I think. Each one had a specific good deed written on its bottom and also in its saucer. And each day, 10 random members of the public were given the opportunity to pick up a cup. If they could take up the challenge of the good deed, they could keep the cup, leaving the saucer, so that within each day of the exhibition went past, more of these deeds were revealed. And then we encouraged people to feed back through Tumblr and our website how they were doing their good deeds, reminding people again that, you know, every action, every good action, in a sense, has a reaction. And sure enough, we had lots of people going, I wasn't picked to choose a cup, but nevertheless, I saw, you know, this challenge and I've decided to do it myself. And then 2020, working with our then trustee Jeremy Deller and our new fellow Johnny Banger, Sports Banger, who's a DJ and bootlegger and activist, this wonderful show called The COVID Letters, where during the first lockdown, Johnny had invited children aged 16 and under from right across the country. He had said if you'd received a letter, which was those letters that Boris Johnson sent out saying, stay at home, protect the NHS, make a poster. So we had 210 of these posters displayed right through the museum, which was really giving children a platform for them to talk about their thoughts and views and opinions about COVID, about the lockdown, about the political response, really whatever their own anxieties, their impressions. But the one voice that we didn't really hear anything from during that period, we're giving and enabling the museum to be a platform to bring those voices to bear. And taking it the next stage further before my dying minute, we also have an area in the museum where we show work that's coming out of the projects that we're running from preschool and hospitals, and also with our young graduate trainees. This was a display that was up when we went into lockdown. But looking at a way that we can extend this and increasingly hand the story that we tell and the telling of it to the communities who really this story is about them and their ancestors, and not just our artist communities, but our young people as well. And so we're currently working with a group of our graduate trainees who are working with us to co-curate our major exhibition for spring of 2023, which is going to be on the theme of family. And we're working also in partnership with the National Gallery on this. We'll be borrowing 4 major loans from them, which will kind of sit at the heart of the show. And the young people will be looking at art from across the centuries, but also commissioning new art, really looking at this idea of family, which of course is very highly charged for them, and interrogating some of the assumptions that are present within society and within some of the art that we will be showing. So really, again, another way to challenge stigma, to raise awareness, to enable these voices from the margins to take centre stage, and to find creative ways to engage wider audiences in the kind of the core story that we tell, which is, as we say, it's about creative action, you know, transforming young lives, and the fact that all of us have a role to play in this, and that creativity lies at the heart of enabling young people to see themselves and the world and their place in that world differently, and to have a voice, as you were saying, Michelle, to have a voice within it, but to choose how that voice sounds, and you know what pitch it is at, and whether it's sung or spoken, or these, you know, to make those choices possible. So yes, that's the work that we do, and do come and see our superheroes show, which is very, very good fun. And I have to say, as somebody who was not remotely interested in comics when we started the show, it is genuinely fascinating, and I am a convert.
Thanks so much, Caro. That last slide was mesmerising for me. We're not case file, we are people. What a powerful statement. So much amazing work going on there, actually. And I'm just really struck by, you started off by talking about creative philanthropy and, you know, the origins of the museum. So many artists care deeply about civic society, don't they? And just will not accept injustice to pass without comment and action. Yeah, and, you know, you further to Claire Twomey's challenge to do a good deal, a deed rather, not deal. That was a perfect segue to what Bob's going to talk about. Yeah, lots of synergy there. So I'm gonna introduce Bob now, if I may. And Caro, if you would stay around for questions, I know we're going to have loads. Thank you so much. So yeah, as our patron, Bob and Roberta Smith has been inspiring NSEAD members with his vision for a world where children are given all the space and time and resources that they need to be artists, and to have an education system that allows them, and it actually encourages them to be powerful. It's a testament actually to the power of his art, but I don't think it's possible to go to a presentation about advocacy for art education and to not see Bob's work referenced. It's pretty much compulsory to include Bob's work in any presentation of that kind, and I go to lots of them, as you can imagine, in my job. I've got to say, yeah, whenever the importance of art education is being discussed, Bob is essentially in the room. I'm really pleased, though, that we've got not just the arts, but Bob himself in the room this afternoon. So I'm going to hand over to you, if I may, Bob. Take the mic.
Thank you very much. It's a funny thing for me, because one of my early slogans was "Make your own damn art." So the idea that art teachers across the country would be getting children to make slogans in the Bob style, but about their own ideas, it kind of horrified me to begin with. But then over the years, because the slogans that many of the teachers have done when they've been teaching Bob in the class, they've been the kids' own slogans. Suddenly I realized how powerful that was and how wonderful it is, really. For me, you know, as an artist, you know, I just come up with these slogans in a space like this, and I paint them. And but the slogans that really matter are the slogans that you've made with your kids in the classroom. So when I see those on Instagram or on Twitter, you know, it's just it kind of freaks me out, but it's kind of just amazing and wonderful. Every year, it seems to be over the past few years, Susan Coles has taken a group of NSEAD members to Yorkshire Sculpture Park and photographed you in front of, or that group in front of a sign that says, and this is, I'm going to show you my PowerPoint now. It's just here. That's my PowerPoint. It's just a load of paintings. But it says, it said for years, it said art makes children powerful. But then it said all schools should be art schools. Sadly, this year, Yorkshire Sculpture Park have removed that painting. So I saw a load of photographs of people recreating the sign. They removed it because it's falling apart, essentially. But and the art makes children powerful eventually fell apart. But I kind of got that lurking in my studio. But the art makes children powerful slogan is kind of it's to do with my ideas, really, as inspired by NSEAD, because I've been advocating the arts. I come from a family of artists. My dad ran Chelsea School of Art in the 1960s, but the point about it is really, that's advocating art at the high end, in a sense. But when I decided I would organise this thing called the Art Party in 2013, and but then I got involved with NSEAD, and I realised that NSEAD itself is actually the Art Party, and the thing about it is that you've got the kids. Well, some of you who are working in early years, you've got them right at that moment when we know, don't we? We know that all children are artists. You know, Picasso knew that, obviously. So made fantastic statements about it. But we know that art, you know, it isn't a thing actually we see in museums. It isn't a thing only practiced by exalted, you know, Royal Academicians or whatever it is, you know, international artists. Art is a psychological phenomenon in the development of human beings, and it's common to every single human being. So another slogan I've worked on recently is simply saying that art is in your head, and to make it happen, you've got to make it happen at your fingertips. But it's actually something that is about our humanity. It's one of the things that allows us to be ourselves. And you know, I've said all these slogans lots and lots of times, but they need repeating. You know, if you teach children to sing, then you'll hear from them later. If you don't teach them to draw, they won't become designers or architects. They won't fashion the world or their lives in the way that they could do if they had been taught to draw. And so that's why back in 2013, we came up with the art party, and we made this letter to Michael Gove. This is the album of we made a spoken word album of the letter to Michael Gove with the Apathy Band on the B side, and that painting has hardly been in my studio since I painted it. It's been in Ireland, it's been in France. Last summer it was in a show at the Harris Museum in Preston. So it's touring. It's been taken by a group of teachers, and they took the actual painting, which is an enormous, great big painting. It's 2.40 meters by 2.40 meters. It's as big as this painting, which is going to the Voorlinden Museum in Holland. It's that size, and they marched it past Parliament, these protesters, with it strapped to their backs. So it's a kind of, you know, you make these things, you make these objects, and you kind of have to deal with them, which leads me on to my pitch to you today. In 2013, I'm going to burst into tears while I tell you the story. It's very difficult to speak about. But in 2013, I was listening to the radio, and I was listening to an amazing broadcast by a guy called David Knott. He was interviewed by the extraordinary broadcaster Eddie Mair. And in this interview, it's hard to listen to. You can still access it on the PM website. He talks about saving people's lives. He's a surgeon in Syria, and he talks about the skills that you need to have if you're a surgeon in working in an austere environment, what they call them. But it could be an earthquake, but more generally for David, it's in war zones. And you have to be a generalist. There's no good being an oncologist or a brain surgeon. You've got to be able to get a bullet out of somebody wherever it goes into that person. And he talks about if you're working in countries which don't have up-to-date medical equipment, then you've got to use equipment from the 1980s. So you've got to be a retro generalist surgeon. And this interview, it's startling and upsetting, really. And I painted it, and I exhibited it in the Royal Academy. And I hadn't asked their permission to do it, but they were very gracious. They turned up. There's Eddie and David Knott. They turned up, and my idea for this painting is that I was going to raise £100,000 and give it to Médecins Sans Frontières and sell this, but I didn't manage to do that. But I am close to doing it. This painting is now on show at the National Museum of Wales. It turns out that David Knott is Welsh, and so to show it down in that museum, this beautiful museum, is fantastic. It's on show at the moment, and we're getting close. I can't say we've actually finalised it, but we're getting close to acquiring it for the museum. And I will give that £100,000 to not Médecins Sans Frontières. And that's the other story about this. This is the strange thing about this. When I painted that, David was a single man. And I met him there with Eddie. And I think, I don't know whether this is a psychological thing. Maybe if you're single, maybe you're braver. You take those risks to go into those kind of war zones. But he went, this is where it all gets crazy. He went on a date with his now wife to see this painting at the RA. And we did an event recently at the new museum, at the National Museum of Wales, where he came and sat down and he told me this. I hadn't realised this until about a month ago, that that they got together. Well, Ellie set up the David Knott Foundation. and they now have 2 kids. And, you know, and he was saying to me, it really surprised me, but he was saying to me, without that painting, it's really, without Eddie Mayer's interview, it's not really the painting, it's really his activity. But he was saying without going on that date with Ellie, you know, they wouldn't have set up the David Knott Foundation. And the David Knott Foundation has saved, they on their figures are that it's saved 3 million people's lives. So it's a very bizarre circumstance. It's not a domino effect, anything to do with me, but it's a kind of commentary about how things happen. But I didn't manage to sell the painting in that period, but I did sell prints of the painting the following year, and I was able to give him a few £1,000s for this new charity that he'd set up. Jessie, my wife, the artist Jessica Borsanger, during the beginning of COVID, you know, I wanted to capitalize on this idea of helping art save lives, trying to get it going. It's insane that we have do something funny for money. We have Macmillan coffee mornings. We have all of these efforts, but we don't have art aid. There hasn't been art aid, but artists all the time are asked to donate works of art for charity. It's, you know, we make things so you can sell them. It's a practical thing. It's not necessarily about you know, thinking more deeply than other human beings about these situations. It's just very practical. Make something, stick it in Instagram and social media. It has lots of evils, but one of the things is it gives you access to markets. So we have this hashtag, and last year we thought, well, we've been battling away, talking to various institutions about doing this and not really getting very far. But then COVID made us thought, well, let's just do it. You know, let's talk about it. Let's just do it. So we set up the hashtag, and last summer we raised 10,000 quid. I was painting. We go out in our car and we paint landscapes, watercolors. So I was just selling these watercolors. But when the war in Ukraine broke out, I thought, well, I've got this painting called Make Art Not War that's in the Tate. I'll just paint that and say we're going to give that money to Médecins Sans Frontières. So we'll give that money to the DEC Ukraine appeal. So I started doing these watercolors. It started being 1 watercolor a day, and then it turned into batches of 12. We've raised £30,000 since that war began. It's happened because of that war. It's not because of the hashtag particularly. But the hashtag, there's another hashtag, which is the Ukraine Support Pledge set up by the people who set up the Artist Support Pledge during COVID to support artists. Well, they've set up the Ukraine Support Pledge. And it's very interesting because it's enacted the Help Art Save Lives effort in a really great way. So, I've been, it started off as individual paintings, and now it's like, I think there's 6 left of the recent batch. And and I just stick them in these envelopes, and it's very easy. What people can do is that they can send artists or a school their image of the hashtag, and then there's no accountancy needed. That the money from the donor has gone straight to the charity. All you're doing is gifting your image to the person who sent you their address, as well as that screenshot, and you can generate funds that way. So my pitch to you, really, in a sense, is to consider this idea. It might work in different varieties of ways, in different situations and social situations, people in different age groups. But if we had every child in the country at some stage, I would think early years would be great. If we had them making art, and then their parents would say to them, "What did you do today?" Well, said, "Well, I made some art and I helped save life." It's very practical. It's not about advocacy of art. It's not about saying something that's terrible. It's positive and forward-looking, and it says, "Well, I made this drawing," and then the parent can say, "Well, I love that drawing. I'm going to put it on the fridge," and the child say, "Only if I can see your donation to the DEC Ukraine appeal," or whatever it is, Amnesty International, or it could be the NHS, could be anything that's to do with life saving. I'm hoping in the next few months I'll be able to make an announcement about that painting that's down in Wales, and it will give impetus to this idea of Help Art Save Lives. And it's all because what you do, what teachers in schools do, is about human rights, essentially. All teachers, all teachers actually, but all art teachers, you are human rights workers. That's what you're doing. You're developing human beings' voices. You're developing their abilities to speak out loud, to perhaps make the art of the future, but to design the future and be able to contribute to the future. The child who is able, to speak, to write, to draw, yes, to add up, will be able to contribute to the future. My son, Fergal, always freaks me out because when he was a little kid, I saw him making this wonderful drawing, which was a loop drawing. He drew a loop and then ran the line through the loop and then onto the next loop. And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, it's a loop drawing, Dad." And I said, "That's amazing. That's an algorithm. That's an instruction. The French would call it a derive." Well, the thing about that is he did that drawing when he's 4. This week he just submitted his finals at the Bartlett. He's amazing at maths. He's amazing at art, and the two aren't mutually exclusive. And I don't believe they're exclusive in anybody. I think people, have those abilities across the ways. The way that we create subjects in schools is frankly bonkers, and all subjects talk to each other. So this sense of that education is about the rights of the child is so important, and I know you know that. So in my estimation, all paintings are placards. All paintings are about the rights of what the artist wants to say about the artist, but they're also about your rights. There are no, I mean, this is slightly my beef. You know, sometimes museums talk about audiences as if they were somehow separate from the whole business of the institution, and they segment them into different ways. But actually, there are no bewildered audiences, because every audience member, you know, is a participant. Artworks are placards. In fact, I'm getting to the end now with my mad rant, but the paintings are getting bigger. All there is art and music. All there is art and music. And words and pictures. Because, ladies and gentlemen, art is the antidote. That's what it's about. You know, artists, and the key thing about this, I haven't got a little painting, I need to paint this one up, but art is about ingenuity. Art is the glue. Art is the enabling factor. It is our art. It is our art that makes us ingenious, which makes us use the sciences, which makes us use mathematics, which makes us use English language, and makes us use music to create a better world. And now I'm going to finish on a song. Which is a terrible idea, isn't it? That's my out of tune guitar. And I want to hear you. I can't really hear you because you're all muted, but you've got to sing along at home. And the line is, art is your human right. I can't hear you. All louder. I'll pretend that I can hear you. Oh, I can't hear you. NSEAD. Art is your human right. Art is your human right. Michelle, I can see, you can mouth it at least. Art is your human right. Yeah, art is your human right. Just like Susan Sontag hanging out in Sarajevo, you think it's all about chiaroscuro. You say, art is your human right. Art is your human right. Just like Turner tying himself to the mast, just like Louise Bourgeois smashing that vase, you say, art is your human right. Yeah, oh, art is your human right. Just like Frida Kahlo crushed underneath that tram, you say, I've had enough of this, man. Just like Yinka Shonibari with his ship Victory, just like Cara Walker turning her Sphinx in sugar as a critique of our sweet tooth. You say, art is your human right. Just like Guernica, just like Picasso's Guernica, painted in black and white, just like Courbet standing on the barricades of the Bastille. You're ready for the fight. You say, art is your human right. Yeah, art is your human right. Just like Van Gogh chopping off his ear, you say that there's nothing to fear. You say, art is your human right. Art is your human right. Stop while you're ahead, Bob. Thank you very much.
Oh my goodness. Fun fact, Bob's in his studio and it's just around the corner from my house, and I feel like I need to run up the road with a cake or something. That's fantastic, thank you. Oh, if only we didn't have Zoom mute and we could have had all voices raised. I think everyone would be grateful that mine was muted, but yeah, that was brilliant. Thank you so much. Oh my goodness. Yeah, well, where do we start? Loads of questions. I mean, the big thing there is, I've got to say as well, there is a tradition that NSEAD conference makes us cry, and particularly our patrons. I had lump in my throat at all points. It started with Lily reminding me of how it felt to be there in front of, you know, a piece of work that just flips your worldview. And then Caro, I've got to say, the bit that really got me was the David Shrigley tokens. And when you have nothing to give but your art, you can still give it. And then full circle to Bob. And that is what Bob is asking us to do. And he's asking us to support our children, our young people, to do that. art saves lives, and you've got evidence of that, Bob. You've got the stats, you've got the data, you've got the numbers. What are we waiting for, really? We are, as NSEAD, will certainly be helping you to connect with the Help Art Saves Lives. I don't know, it's not campaign so much, is it, Bob? It's, what would you call it?
Well, I think it's a grassroots thing, really, but it'd be nice one day if it could grow into something bigger. And I'm always talking to organizations about that. But actually, it's going, you know, it's going. That hashtag is there. The Ukraine support pledge is there. But it's just about perhaps thinking whether the NSEAD at some stage maybe wants to do a day or a month. You know, you can do it in lots of different ways, can't you? And I think in a way, if you prescribe it too heavily, it means that, you know, it gets too complicated. But it's actually happening. There are people putting images up on Help Art Save Lives and on the Ukraine support pledge. And that focus is, I mean, it's horrible that it takes the focus of something like that to make people realize that they can do something, but that quite often is the way. We've seen that, how it's changed, how COVID has changed our lives. But you can see that's the nature of things, isn't it? So it's, though social media has enabled that to really work.
Well, we will do everything from our end to amplify that and help all people we know who are Legion to connect, because it touches a chord for all of us. And you know what we're all here for at the end of the day is to make things better. I've had a request actually from Emma Hall. She would love to hear, before we go into any questions, the speakers' responses to each other. Now, I don't know if that grips you all with fear, but I wonder if you want to take a minute to think about, you know, what you've heard from the other speakers and what you might like to say.
Well, I could say something. I mean, that Lily's presentation about Ai Weiwei, that's so powerful, isn't it? And that piece is that's a shocking piece, isn't it? All that crumbling concrete and corruption and building those schools, killing those kids. And then Ai Weiwei, you know, he went there to Sichuan province. He was beaten up by the police. He took the bags of the kids that were killed and exhibited them as an artwork in Germany. And that led to him then being detained and spending those 80 days in jail. And I first met Ai Weiwei at that piece, actually, and it was yeah, he's a great guy, and you're great to highlight that in such a poetic way. It was very good.
Lily, how does that feel as a response to your presentation?
That's amazing, thank you. I can't believe you've met him. It's really strange because I have actually given this talk in front of numerous audiences, and after each time I do get the odd person coming up to me and saying, oh, I have met this guy, and I'm in awe, but I'm also slightly jealous at the same time because he is a bit of a hero of mine. So it's great that you've met him. Yeah, and
I'm sure you'd like. I'm sure,
sorry?
you know, he lives in Cambridge now.
Does he? That explains a lot because he had an exhibition there recently, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I thought, Lily, your piece is fantastic. And I also I was really drawn to the fact as well that I think, and I'm sure, you know, this teachers experience this all the time, about how so many adults underestimate children and underestimate young people and their capacity for seeing the complexity and the politics within art, and for being able to use it themselves as a way to talk about things that are actually challenging and potentially confrontational. And I think it's really important and really refreshing and also really inspiring to hear you talk so articulately about how you were drawn to the politics of that piece. And I think when I think about the COVID letters, and I think particularly about one critic who came to the opening and got really hot and bothered and confrontational about the fact that she was saying, you know, I just think these children are all so angry and it's unnecessary. You know, and this thing about, and somehow that you know, lockdown had made them angry. And I remember saying, but they were angry before. Like, there is a lot to be angry about. And just because you don't want to hear what they have to say, you don't want to hear that anger, you don't want to hear their opinions. And I think, yes, so I was very inspired by hearing you be drawn to and articulate and embrace that complexity and the challenge that art can give us all. And I think, again, you know, Bob's work, I always work that even Hogarth to an extent, the way that artists can very often slip under the radar when the gatekeepers are not noticing, or the gatekeepers do not give them enough credit for what they can do, and they have a capacity to awaken us. And as Lily, as you described so perfectly, how that piece awakened you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Never underestimate the power of being underestimated, I think. Yes, absolutely. I've got quite lots of questions in the box, and people asking questions. If you would like the opportunity to say your question for yourself, I'll give you that opportunity. But of course, if you prefer me to read it, you can sort of shrink back. But I'm going to start with our president, Liz McFarlane, who has a question for Lily, actually. Liz, I'm going to give you talking privileges if you want to step up.
Hi. Thank you for your very eloquent and thought-provoking presentation, Lily, about the power of art as activism. But I was wondering to what extent your experience of art at school has enabled or encouraged you to be an activist within your work.
Okay, that's a very interesting question. I'm going to be honest, right? I'm rather cynical about the art A-level education anyway. I feel like it's so academic. They give you this mark scheme and you have to get this certain bandwidth of marks to get your A star. And I think because it's so focused on skill and presentation, people often forget the message of art that often comes along with it. So personally, from my experience of art in school as a purely academic A-level subject, I think it's lacking. So for me, when I try to present activism through art, it's often outside of school and A-levels, I suppose. And I guess in a way that restrictive aspect of A-level art has pushed me to be more of an activist in my own right. So for example, I recently did a piece because I'm an art scholar, our school has an annual Art Scholars exhibition. So I took that as an opportunity to really explore my creative boundaries without, you know, an A-level mark scheme kind of looming over me. So I created a response to COVID-19 because a lot of my education over the GCSE year was dominated by online school. And I created a Teams grid of all my friends, and I did that in pencil, and I drew their different reactions. And it was just a commentary on how online school really impacted everyone's mental health, which is often overlooked. So yeah, that's what comes to mind right now.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm really interested that you have art at school and the things that you do out of school.
It sounds like some of your best work may not make its way into your A-level portfolio, Lily, which I think is often the way.
Yeah, sadly.
But it's a shame it has to be separate.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be separate. No, I still try to integrate meaning into my own art and A-level. It's just, it can't be a priority, annoyingly, though. I guess once you do immerse yourself in the art A-level and you kind of get into the flow of it, it does become a bit easier. But it's not really the same, in my opinion, anyway.
Thank you.
Lots of teachers in the room listening, Lily, and
hope I haven't annoyed anyone.
No, I think lots of people will be nodding their heads. We can't see them, but I'm pretty sure they will be. Thank you. I've got a question actually for Caro from Sophie Leach. Sophie, I'm going to pass the mic to you, hoping that you're there to collect it, because I know.
Hello.
Hi, Sophie.
Hello. Yes, Carol, that was so interesting. So I'm really grateful for your insights. I've been to the Foundling Museum so many times, and each time I come away learning more. So your inch wide, mile deep expression really resonated with me. And I've always been hopeful and optimistic that no matter where you are in the UK, that you'd be able to access some of the experiences, sort of vision of young children and their families coming from sort of the hinterland in London, and hoping that there would be other foundling spaces, you know, many years ago in other communities. But now, if a young person wanted to get involved, you mentioned that there's going to be a new digital development. Could you just share a little bit more about how that might look and how a young person from the top to tail of the UK might get involved in what you do, or what you hope they might be able to do in the very near future?
Sure. Well, the digital portal is going to be, there will be an aspect of it which is sort of more generally publicly accessible, but it is actually going to be focused on young people with care experience. So it will, the majority of it will be, in a sense, private, and it's really a way for us to try and kind of take aspects of the training program that we do in the museum more widely. But what we've learnt over so we started the training program in 2017, was really how the vast majority of the young care leavers who we work with are incredibly isolated, and they don't know, they don't have a kind of peer group, they don't have other young people of their own age with a similar lived experience. And the training program provides a kind of community for them, and a place where they feel safe and free of stigma. And obviously the story that we tell is a place that gives them pride in their care story, and a sense of place within the British culture and British history. So we want to try and create a space, obviously that's digital, that will reach young people, care experience young people across the country, but enable them to have a forum where they can begin to develop that sense of community, perhaps digitally, and then through that community, as I said, find ways to prompt them to the pathways to creative opportunities on their doorstep. And I think we find that I think one of the biggest impacts of growing up in care is that young care leavers tend to be very, very risk averse, and don't want to put themselves in positions where they may fail because they don't have a support network to pick them up and support them. So to be able to act as we do, in a sense, in the physical way with our trainees and graduates that we have within the museum, acting in that slightly sort of slightly, I guess you say, maternal way about, you know, come on, you can do it. Well, look, don't worry, I'll give them a ring, I'll say you're going to apply, they'll be looking out for you, it's okay. That we will be able to, in a sense, think about how we can connect these care experience young people across the country to our peers and colleagues in arts organisations right across the country, who are only too eager to be there and to work alongside these young adults. So sorry, that's Sophie, that's a very long-winded thing. So it's not, in a sense, this particular initiative isn't for young people everywhere. It's very much focused on care experience young people, but the more public aspect of it will enable audiences more widely to participate in the creative output of these young people, and you know, in whatever form that takes. So that our original training program was around art skills, but the second training program that we now run is creative writing. So yeah, there will be an opportunity for that engagement, and we are using our website increasingly. And again, Bob is right, through lockdown, working with Quentin Blake and Jacqueline Wilson to do online projects and kind of generative storytelling and stuff. It was really good fun. But yes, sorry, that's a very long-winded answer. The portal is mainly for care leavers.
And absolutely, so it should be. In fact, I probably should have said that specifically, a group of people that you would not know where we are today with all the facilities, all the digital ways in which we can connect, how a group of young people, and I'm sure it's many, many more than we even realise, whose lives are completely turned upside down as soon as they've left a care system. And I can see that, you know, the more that this goes out far and wide for specific group of people, the better. And we have much to learn as a society where we are all connected to those people, yet people can feel very, very alone, very isolated, despite these methods that we have to connect today. So thank you for all that you do. It's
no, not at all. I mean, you're absolutely right, because the McAllister report obviously came out this week, but you know, I think we have about 80,000 children in England in care at any one time, and that's care cliff, young people leaving care at 18. About a third of care leavers will become homeless within the first 2 years of leaving care, because there's you know, it's shocking. One of our graduates is one of our trustees, and she put it really well. She said, "Nobody told me you had to pay for water," you know, and I just think, so thinking about how we can, and again, that inch wide, mile deep, how can we use the very particular story that we have to try and affect change just in this one bit? You know, not, you know, we can't do everything, but we think we can do something of importance in this one bit. So that's where we put that in the early years.
Thank you for doing that bit. It's huge and very important and vital. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that question, Sophie. And I think inch wide, mile deep is something we might take forward as a bit of a mantra. It sounds like a good one to focus and really make a difference. And actually, inch, mile, wide, deep kind of question, really. Susie Tutchell, this one's for Bob, the wonderful Bob, as Susie says. Susie, I'm not sure if you're available to take the mic, but if you are and you'd like to ask a question yourself, go ahead. If not, I'll read it for you. Nope, Susie's there.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't expecting to speak. Taking me back. I was very excited. It was brilliant. I had so many questions for everyone, but I was so delighted to listen to Bob because he's very inspiring. And I love the way they all dovetailed and, you know, really kind of made sense together as three presentations. Because when Caro was talking about the histories that we bring and all our stories, and then Bob uses that, the voices that you produce via your placards. And I guess I just wondered if there was one particular child who had a story or, I don't know, a message that you were aware of that's moved you so much, that's particularly, you know, that's inspired one particular painting that you've produced.
Well, I don't know. I think, you know, I teach at London Metropolitan University, and which is, you know, in America, it'd be a community college. It was, when I started teaching there, it was a polytechnic. So it was a long time ago. And we have, you know, it's not an elite art school. You know, some of the art schools are quite elitist. The art school that I went to, Goldsmiths, well, actually the art school that I went to, Reading University, no black students at all on that course. And all the time that I was there was one South Asian student, I think. So the arts have a problem in that domain, but in the art school where I teach, it's a bit better. But we have we're in the East End, and we have a lot of disadvantaged kids come to us, and sometimes I think, well, maybe taking out £30,000 to study art is perhaps not the right thing for you. I mean, I do actually think that sometimes, but I also think it's very, very, very difficult, you know, trying to solve from an institutional level as a down the pipeline to address the issues that some of our students have at London Metropolitan University. By the time they get to me, it's almost, you know, it's too late. It's not too late for everybody, but it can be. But the thing about art teaching in schools, this is where I might disagree with Caro a little bit. I was very impressed a few years ago when at the Royal Opera House, and they have a wonderful program where they teach kids the violin. But the director of the Royal, I went to this event which was a bit like this, but actually in person, and they were saying how wonderful this is. And he said, well, look, we're the Royal Opera House. We can't get every kid in the country to study the violin at the Royal Opera House. You know, that doesn't work. It happens if we have music in schools, if we have art in schools. And that's why, Susie, I think the NSEAD is such an important organisation, because really it's not an inch wide, mile deep organisation. It's a mile wide. It's the country wide, and you've got every child. You know, that's the amazing thing. When those kids do those slogans, those Bob slogans, it's their slogans that they're coming up with, you know, and they're coming up with colour relationships, and they're thinking about what font to use. That is countrywide. In an institution, in a capital city, of course we have to think what we can do, you know, and as individuals, sometimes it feels, wow, we can't do a lot. You know, when I'm teaching my students at London Metropolitan University, you know, I try and help them, but we can't do everything. But actually, national art education in our schools is wild. It's so exciting, and it is you lot who've got the power, actually, and particularly, and the particular thing that we've got to do, which is where I think I really do agree with Caro, is in early years. You've got to, we've got to support our primary school teachers who may not be art specialists, may be frightened by art, actually, may not be that great at art, but it's how we support those early years teachers, nursery school teachers, how we support the arts in those environments. And that's why the NSEAD is a much more important organisation to the arts than the Tate Gallery in this country. That's why, because you've got that breadth. In the universities, in the art galleries, we don't have that breadth, but you lot, you do.
Yeah, here, I completely agree with you, Bob. Absolutely, completely agree.
I just wanted to say quickly that I teach at Reading University, and it has changed since then. I just thought you might want to know that. But thank you so much for the answer.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's well, I love that as a note for us to close this first conference session on the NSEAD. Right, it is bigger than the Tate, more influence. I'm going to bank that, Bob. I absolutely am. Yeah.
It's much more important to the arts than the Tate.
I agree, and that's because
not that the Tate doesn't do great work.
Of course it does. NSEAD is it's a community. It's a community of arts educators. It's a learning community, and we can together make change. We do make change. We can. We have a voice because there's still lots of art, and I think, as you said, Bob, where there is art, there is hope. This afternoon's been so hopeful. It has been all about voice, all about power. We have to continue. The conversation has begun this summer. It continues for the next 8 weeks or more. So please, all of you, come and join us for different sessions, get involved. I'm going to kind of put a question to the audience and the people who are going to be watching this recording. You've heard an awful lot today. What change do you want to see, and what are you going to do about it? You've had some good challenges of good deeds that you can do. You've heard about what other people are doing. How do we take it forwards? So I hope to see everybody at more conference sessions. We've got our summer social on July the 9th. All welcome for tea, cake, and maybe something a bit stronger, and a lovely chance to reconnect. Just remains to say thank you so much to our amazing speakers who are making a difference who are art activists all. Thanks, everybody. Thanks all. Have a lovely evening. Bye.